Hello, and welcome to episode 38 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. We're here today with Chris Ullman of the Carlyle Group in Washington, D.C. How are you doing today, Chris?
Jordan, couldn't be better. Thanks for having me.
Great. So the first question I have for you is, what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done to advance the public interest, and why?
The public interest is really important to me and my family.
Mm-hmm.
I have these very special memories of sitting at our dining room table when I was a little kid and watching my father pay the bills, but once a month he would always write a $25 check to Covenant House, which is a national organization that helps kids who are on the street. It started in New York City, and there's a pretty active Covenant House here in Washington as well. So this notion of that giving money to help people in need. And, I saw that from my father, and that has really resonated with me over time. And to this day, giving money to Covenant House has always been a priority. And my wife and I give a fair amount of money away to a variety of charities and other organizations that help the public interest. So that's kind of the motivating kind of component, or what inspired me as a child. And so serving the public interest in some capacity has been very important to me. When I first came to Washington, I tutored inner city kids. This is back in 1987, and did that for around 15 years. My day jobs, I feel, have always had some kind of component to serving the public interest. When I worked on Capitol Hill, I worked for the Budget Committee, and the goal was to have good government and prudent budgets, and I felt that that is something that motivated me.
Yeah.
And here at the Carlyle Group, which is a global investment firm, our investors are, for the most part, public pensions. So when I come to work every day, doing media relations and corporate communications, yes, I work for Carlyle, but we ultimately work for our investors. So if I do a good job, and the firm does a good job, that means we're serving our investors well, and that means everyday people, firemen and nurses and teachers, will have a more secure retirement because we've invested their money well. On the fun side, I'm a champion whistler, and I whistle Happy Birthday 400 times a year to friends and family and people I barely even know. And to me, that's a way of serving the public interest too, because I think life is the greatest gift we've ever had, and we should celebrate it. So that's a fun little thing. And also on the philanthropy side, my wife and I send 4 inner city kids to private school every year. We think education is at the core of maximizing the gifts that God has given us as humans. And then a lot of times schools in the inner city just aren't that good. And so we, through a couple of different schools, one called Cornerstone here in Washington, and one called Brookstone in Charlotte, we send several kids to school there to try to get a better education. And also through a Native American reservation in North Dakota. We support a Catholic school there that serves several Native American tribes.
So you are engaged pretty much across quite a wide and diversified portfolio of philanthropy. It's difficult. There's so many opportunities to provide so many people who need. How are you able to identify these in particular?
Well, we're really big on efficacy. I'd like to be the big fish in the small pond. And what I mean by that is that if I have a choice of giving away $10,000, say, do I give it to the Red Cross, which is a great organization? So there I am the little fish in the big pond.
Which is to say that $10,000 is a smaller proportion of their total annual revenues than it would be for a smaller organization that doesn't receive as much charity.
Exactly. So while I would never tell someone not to give $10,000 or any amount to the Red Cross, in terms of what my wife and I are trying to do, I'd rather be the big fish in the small pond. I'd
Right.
rather go to a school like Cornerstone and say, here's $10,000, and now I'm going to send 2 kids to private school who otherwise would go to a public school. So we are going to impact actual lives.
Yeah.
Here's this kid and here's this kid, and now because of our gift, we're able to help them have a better chance of maximizing their gifts.
How do you identify the children who will be receiving these gifts? And does it keep piling on? I mean, children need to go to school again the next year. Do they continue in the private school? And do you just keep adding to the pool of children who you're funding every single year to go to private school?
Well, what's nice is that we've stuck with the same kids for many years.
I see.
And so the organization itself goes through their enrollment process and vetting process, and then they match us up. So we become so-called partners with the students, and some of whom we've gotten to know pretty well over the years, and who I whistle happy birthday for, which is fun. And it's really inspiring. We get a note from the young lad that we work with in Charlotte, and every year he sends us a note saying, "Thanks for being my partner, and this is what I'm learning, and I just appreciate it." And I mean, we'd still help even if he didn't send that, but we have his picture on our refrigerator, and I want my kids. We have 3 children who are 14, 13, and 10. I want them to know that we are helping the community, and it's part of, just as I sat at that dining room table with my father 40 years ago,
Right.
I want my children to know that we're helping kids in our community and that they have a similar duty. And along those lines, we give our kids an allowance every week, and we call it Church Savings Fund. And we give them $1 per year of living every week. So if you're 10, you get $10, and we have 3 jars. You have Church Savings Fund. So for the church jar, we put in $3.33, and then the savings jar, the same thing, and then the fund jar. And they bring their church jar to church, and they put it in the collection basket, or we're Catholic, so they always have a thing called a poor box, and you put it in the poor box, and that goes to help people. So we're trying to teach them philanthropy as well. And interesting thing about philanthropy is that it's an ancient Greek word that means the love of humanity. It's not just rich people writing checks. And yes, rich people do write checks, thankfully, but that whole notion of time, talent, and treasure is important. That if you don't have a lot of money, hopefully you have a talent and you have time. Right at this point in my life, I have more money than I have time.
You have all 3, apparently. You're whistling.
Well, the whistling.
Happy birthday.
Well, that is basically has become a ministry for me to celebrate people's lives. But ultimately, I do have more money than time, so that's why we try to give away money to causes that really do serve the public interest.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Do you think you could whistle for 5 seconds a tune, the happy birthday tune?
Happy birthday.
That's amazing. And now you've actually written a book on this theme. What's the name of your book, and why did you write it?
So my book is called Find Your Whistle. And the subtitle is still in the works, but the premise is that everyone has a simple gift, and the goal is to find it, develop it, and share it to make the world a better place, one person at a time. I think our culture is very hero-centric, and while learning from and acknowledging heroes is important, it's hard to be a hero every day. But everyone has a simple gift. And if we, in America is 300 plus million people, if everyone, developed their gift and touched a heart touched a life, eventually you make the world a better place. I didn't invent this concept, but I'm trying to give name to it. Mm-hmm. So since I am a whistler, and the book is very much about how I've taken my simple gift of whistling. I'm not curing cancer, I'm whistling. But I've developed it and I share it with people through the happy birthday whistles, and I've whistled for the president in the Oval Office, and I've whistled with 10 symphony orchestras. But what I've learned over time is that this is an unusual gift, that people respond well to it, and it's now become kind of taken on a life of its own. I did a TEDx talk a couple of years ago where I talked about my whistling, but the main message was that you have a gift, you in the audience. Mm-hmm. What is your gift? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make the world a better place? And what's neat about it is that a lot of people say to me, I don't have a whistle. And I say, oh, you most certainly do. Mm-hmm. The odds are you just haven't given it a name. But we know that once you give a name to something, you have more volition and you have more purpose. And if something doesn't have a name, it's hard to be very focused about it. But once you give it a name, and your whistle could be helping kids in the inner city through giving money to schools, that could be your whistle. I met a young man who works at Bank of America just this past year, who, after hearing me talk about my book, said, I don't have a whistle. And I said, tell me about yourself. And he said, well, I grew up in the inner city. I went to college, got a job at a big bank, and now my job is to go into the inner city and help people get loans to start small businesses and the like. And I said, that's your whistle. And we talked about it some more, and he was a little skeptical at first. But in the end, he was like, you're right. Now I've given it a name. I can be more kind of proactive about it.
So would you describe the whistle as more of a passion, or more of a talent, or more of something that just makes the world better in your own unique way?
Well, they're kind of follow on from each other. Mm-hmm. So underlying it all is a talent. I'm able to whistle, and then I've developed it over time. Mm-hmm. I started competing in the international competition in 1993, and I won the international competition 4 times. Mm-hmm. And I competed 9 times overall. And then I started doing things with it, getting media attention and the like. Mm-hmm. But what really warmed my heart was whistling for people in need. In 2004, I got a phone call from a lady who said, I want to buy your CD and give it to my son. And my son is severely cognitively and physically challenged. But he can whistle. He can't speak, but he can whistle. And I want to give him your CD. And I said, well, I'm honored and humbled. And then I said, when's his birthday? And she said, it's whatever. And I said, I'll whistle for him on his birthday. So that was 12 years ago. And we are family friends now.
Wow.
So I've gotten to know, his name is Preston, gotten to know Preston and his family. And it's been a remarkable experience for me to both take note of this young man who otherwise I would never really be able to communicate with, or I probably never would have even met him. But what's really beautiful about it is that I have developed a much greater appreciation for people who have physical and mental challenges, because it's really not my world. I'm not a healthcare professional, and I don't have anyone in my immediate family who has these challenges. So I just don't encounter people like that. But now we go to an annual fundraiser that the organization that helps him hosts. It's called Jubilee, and it's in Maryland. It's an amazing organization, and it helps people with cognitive and physical challenges. And what's really, this will make you cry, is that when you're in kind of the A-list circles of Washington, you don't really encounter people who are handicapped. You might occasionally. But when you go to these fancy parties and things, you don't see people in wheelchairs. You don't see people who have aides by their side helping them because they either can't stand up without help or might do something inappropriate. But at Jubilee, half the people there have some kind of challenge. And they're having a good time. And they have gifts that are underappreciated. And when I go to this fundraiser now every year, I'm reminded that they are a part of the community, and too often they are pushed aside. And this organization is a really amazing organization, raising a lot of money to help people with their challenges. And so it's given me a greater appreciation for the experience that they have, and that they are members of the community, and that they have a lot to contribute to. It's different to some extent than all the smart, fancy people that I usually interact with. Mm-hmm. But you know what? They're God's gift as well.
You speak a lot about personal touch and human impact. How does Preston react to you? Tell me a little bit about the relationship you've developed with this child, or however old he is now, who isn't able to verbally communicate with you.
It's really incredible. We've never spoken to each other. But what I've learned, again, something I didn't realize before, is that you can communicate with people without speaking to them. To give you an example, when we see each other, it's so obvious he knows who I am. Mm-hmm. And I go up, we give each other a hug, and at the last event, which was in the spring, he had his aide on one side, and I came up, I gave him a hug, I say, "Hi, Preston," I whistle a little, and he gives me a little whistle. And he held my hand. Huh. And I'm a guy, and I usually don't hold hands with guys, but, and I thought, this is him saying, "You're my friend." Mm-hmm. And we just stood there, holding hands. He's 30 now, and I'm 53. His mom was right there, just loving the whole thing, and it was really an amazing experience. And I talk about this in the book, and the power of this relationship with Preston. Mm-hmm. And so the whistling has enabled me to give back to the community in ways that I never, ever anticipated. I mean, it's really pretty astounding, and it's very humbling.
So speaking about your motivations, it sounds like you give, but as an instruction, as an example to your children, you give out of obligation to the community, but also I feel like a lot of your motivation is somewhat founded in love of fellow man and sympathy and empathy for their situation, and the idea that there may be a lot of gifts that people may have. And it sounds like your role is to help people realize their gifts, and that may be by teaching them to whistle or pointing out that their profession actually does make the world better, or it sounds like you're able to provide them with an education that will allow them to use their talents in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. Does that resonate with you? Would you say that your motivation kind of comes from heart and love? You spoke of religion, maybe God. What are your motivations?
Change can come from the top down, or it can come from the bottom up. And I think both are legitimate, but ultimately there are a lot more everyday people than there are leaders. So therefore, if I'd rather do something as an everyday person. I'm not an elected official or the head of some giant organization. I'd rather figure out what's happening kind of within arm's length in my community and do something about it. If it's a charitable organization that needs financial support, or a family that I can touch hearts in some way. I think that's that's what is incumbent upon all of us to do, to not just be told what to do by some government entity, but to take command of our own situations, to be active in our communities. And yes, there are many kind of concentric circles, but I think if this were a dartboard, at the center of the dartboard is the individual, and then you have to work out your individual and the family, your bigger circle of friends, and then you get into the whole notion of a town, or and then a state, and then a country. So it's these concentric circles, but at the core of it is the individual, and you need to I think, take action and do things rather than wait to be told what to do. And you mentioned empathy a moment ago. I think that is an incredibly powerful phenomenon. And I'm working on a talk right now. I'm going to do another TED talk. This is TEDx Vail in January. And my talk is on how to improve race relations in America, which is a big topic, and it's a very topical topic. But the core of my message is empathy, and that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should do a lot more listening than talking. And my message will focus on the power of listening to people. And I'm Caucasian, so I'm going to tell my story from, a Caucasian, this Caucasian person's point of view. And one of the examples I'm going to use is that you take the phrase, Black Lives Matter. Too often, people, when they hear that phrase, will say, well, white lives matter too, or all lives matter, or blue lives matter. When I think the response should be, tell me your story. Rather than make a statement, let's ask a question. So if an African American says Black Lives Matter, well, I shouldn't just say white lives matter, because all that says is talk to the hand. It says, I didn't hear a word you said, I'm just going to tell you what I think. And what we need, and I think this is at the core of constructive human relations, is empathy. If an African American says Black Lives Matter, I want to say, tell me your story. What's it like to be black in America today? Have you been discriminated against? What can we do to help you be all God created you to be? And that is what I think is central. And motivating it all is my religious beliefs, is that God created us, God gave us life, and it's our job to make the world a better place, to develop the skills that God has given us, and to effect change in a positive way. And that's what I tell our children. If my kids come home from school with a C on their report card, I say, did you do the best you could? Which really is saying, are you doing the best with the gifts God has given you? And if they say yes, then I say, okay. If they say no, then I say, well, we're going to work on that, because you want to maximize your gifts. And then, yes, we're always learning, but as you grow and mature as a person, and you develop your skills and abilities, then I think it's incumbent upon us to say, how do we share them with the world, which is really at the core of what Find Your Whistle is about. And anyway, there you go.
So when somebody goes up to you and says Black Lives Matter, and you ask in turn, what's your story? How have you changed by listening?
Well, it's really at the core of empathy. I'm a partner and a managing director here, so I'm very senior at the firm. One day, I asked 3 administrative assistants to go to lunch. All 3 were I've been friendly with for a number of years. I've been here 15 years. All African American women around my age, probably in their 40s, 50s or so. First of all, they were shocked that a managing director would just take them to lunch. But the real point was, I just wanted to just get to know them better and to hear what it's like to be an African American in America today. Because too often people talk to people who they are either know already, or they hear commentators saying things that a lot of times people tune into things that just repeat what they have already been thinking or hearing, rather than going to a different pool of information. And it's really impacted me a lot to have, to break bread with someone who has different life perspectives than me. And that's really impacted my views on empathy. That's the only way that we can really heal from a race relations standpoint, is empathy.
So being able to improve the world is kind of the first step may be action, but really there's another step that's quite important, which is engaging, listening, and understanding where they're coming from. And by accessing their perspective, you enter into their world and potentially have more empathy for them, and that'll drive more public service. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that true?
Well, the only way you can build bridges and solve problems is by listening to each other and building trust. Because at the core, well, what flows from empathy is trust. So if I tell someone in response to Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, I have no empathy, and the possibility of building trust is zero. But if I say to someone, tell me your story, then, and I genuinely mean it, I'm not just saying it, but I really mean it, and I listen, and I ask good questions, and I ask good follow-up questions, then, and only then, can you develop trust. And then you'll be able to share perspectives better. And then it becomes more of a two-way street. And too often we have the talk to the hand approach, which is you have your view, I have my view, and if you don't like my view, too bad. I mean, who on earth ever thought that was a good way to engage with another human? I mean, it's just shocking. I mean, if you look at public discourse in general, it's very finger-pointing oriented. Rather than saying, tell me your story, it's, well, that's your story? Well, let me tell you my story. Think, your listeners, think about just recent conversations you've had where someone will say, well, what did you do on vacation? Oh, well, I had this wild experience, blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes the response is, well, I had this wild experience too. Yeah. It's just the way people communicate, which is not a really good way.
How should they respond?
What they should respond is, wow, well, how do you feel? What was that like? How did it impact your vacation? Did you learn anything from this? Were you prepared for it? I mean, let people tell their story, and then at a natural point in the conversation, you say, wow, I can understand why that was a challenging situation. I once had a situation like that too.
So what's the goal of that kind of conversation? The goal isn't necessarily to communicate what you did or what they did, but it's more to create mutual understanding and trust?
Exactly. That is exactly it. Because in the end, if someone has been heard and understood, then they're more likely to hear and understand you, which is where mutual trust comes from. So, for example, if you look at the way most politicians, say white conservatives, deal with the black community, well, they show up every 4 years. If they show up and say, hey, can I speak to your church? Because I want you to vote for me. I mean, that is not how you build trust. I mean, what they should be doing is the day after the election, say, let's talk. And let's talk not because I want you to vote for me, but because I want to understand you. Yeah. And then with the hope that you will have mutual understanding and trust. And then as a politician, since politicians do want votes, if there is true, genuine trust and mutual understanding, then they will be open to your message someday. And that is really at the core of all relationships. It's not just a white politician seeking a black person's vote, but it's how the best human relationships work under any circumstance.
So as we near the end of this podcast, I'd like to ask you a final question. Reflecting upon the work you've done instructing civic students from around the country, publishing a book about public service, whistling, sending children to school in North Carolina, helping Native Americans in North Dakota, I want to bring us back to that concentric circle. You said that we're not all celebrities, and those of us who are just normal people ought to do something within arm's reach in our own community. But it seems like, and you mentioned multiple levels of community, local and county and state and national, but it sounds like you have your hands in all those different circles of your concentric circle conception of community. How is it that you define your community? And why is it that you've chosen to give so much of yourself to those communities?
Well, I've been given a lot. I am healthy, financially successful. I have, as I like to say, my wife still loves me. My children are healthy and happy. I work at an amazing firm. I live in America. I have been given so much. And it's my duty, both as a citizen and as a Christian, to give back. So ultimately, that's my motivation. And ultimately, for me, and I think for all people, you have to figure out where can you effect change. And President Obama can affect a nation, a world. I can't do that, but I can affect this kid at Cornerstone School. I can call up this 100-year-old man and honor him on his birthday. I can give money to a group that is going to make an important difference in someone's life tomorrow. So I try to have a broad view of the people beside me, but there are people in North Dakota that somehow I got in touch with. I was moved by their mission. I was financially able to do it, so we did it. And as one of my bosses has said, when you write the check, and this is in terms of giving money, it often hurts while you're writing it, but it never hurts afterwards.
So that has been Chris Ullman, who speaks about empathy, trust, proximity, creating proximity regardless of geographic distance. Somebody who can span time and space, especially the spaces that we create between each other, so that we can make this world a better place through the immediacy of his action and reaching out with empathy to touch another person's life. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been episode 38 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.